Now that you have an idea about the overall data visualization strategy, let's dig a little deeper into the specifics of each chart type and when you would want to use it. Here's a summary of the main chart types and what they are used for. A bar chart is where bar or column lengths show differences between categories or groups. They are typically used to show change over time or to compare categories. Pie charts are used to show the size of each part, that is, slice, relative to the whole pie. Line charts are typically used with continuous data to show time series, that is, how the data change over time. Scatter plots show relationships between two variables. Are they correlated, and if so, what is the nature of the relationship? Bubble charts are like scatter plots, but where a third variable is added to the plot, reflected in the size of the bubble. A heat map shows comparisons between geographical areas, with color intensity showing the differences between the areas. It's also sometimes used to show areas on a web page or display ad to show which parts attract the most attention. Looking a little closer at bar charts, there are two common types used to compare categories or time periods. The vertical column chart is the default chart type unless the category labels are very long, in which case a horizontal chart is easier to read. Another variation is the stacked bar chart, which allows you to show the contribution or percentage of different parts to the whole. You can also compare multiple groups or time periods with this format. A 100% stacked chart is one where the total height corresponds to 100% and the total is not important, but the percentage contributions of the part are the key takeaway. Here are some best practices. Use horizontal labels to make them easy to read or tilt them at an angle if they don't fit. The space between bars should be half the width of each bar. Start the y-axis at 0 so that viewers can accurately interpret the height of the bars. Keep colors consistent across bars. Only use a different color when you want to highlight a particular bar or data point. Order the bars alphabetically or by value. Line charts are used all the time, mainly to show time series data. The variables must be continuous for this to be effective. Best practices for line charts include using a zero baseline is preferred, but if the variations in the data are small, you can truncate the scale to make these changes more visible. Use fewer lines rather than more. Too many lines is confusing. If you need to show more, put them in a separate chart. Use solid lines only because dashed or dotted lines are distracting. Place labels next to the lines so they can be easily interpreted instead of putting them in a legend box. Use the right height so that the plot takes up about 2/3 of the y-axis length. Scatter plots are commonly used to show relationships between two variables. This chart shows the relationship between ad expenditures and sales for various product families. Best practices for scatter plots are start the y-axis at 0. If you need to include more variables in the plot, such as product type or profitability, you can do so by using different colors or bubble sizes. Use trend lines to show the nature of the correlation between the variables. If you want viewers to compare trend lines, don't show more than 2 at a time, as that can make it difficult to interpret. Bubble charts are like scatter plots, but a third variable is added to the plot, reflected in the size of the bubble. For bubble charts, best practices include making sure the labels are visible and can be identified with the corresponding bubble. Size the bubbles based on their area, not diameter. So if bubble 1 has twice the value of bubble 2, it should have twice the area of bubble 2. Avoid using shapes that are not symmetrical around their center. For example, the money bag shape in this diagram. This can lead to errors in interpretation. Heat maps are typically used to compare geographical areas with intensity of color used to show differences. In this example, the darker shades indicate states that have more service contracts. For heat maps, best practices are use a simple map outline and avoid the use of thick lines for the borders. Instead of using different colors to show different values, use a single color with varying shades to show high and low values in the data. Don't use patterns if possible, as they can distract rather than clarify. Use appropriate ranges for the different shades such that there is a roughly even distribution of data between them. In the example, instead of using ranges with 6, 2, and 7 values each, a better approach would be to use ranges with 2 or 3 values in each. For the next class, complete this assignment and bring your work to class. You may be asked to share your work with the class, so be prepared. If you have questions, ask them in class so we can go over the answers.